Good evening, all. Warm greetings from all of us. Welcome all to another session of Friday Waters. Idea of Friday Waters is to wet the Fridays with fun-filled and yet fruitful activities for the future generations. Friday Waters has water talkies, bio reading, thesis club, and water arts. The focus of Water Thesis Club is on bringing the student scholars who have done or are doing thesis alias research on water matters to the session in order to discuss with them the making of thesis research and the issues around the subject covered. I am joined by Dr. Mansee Bal Bhargava as the discussant for today's session. Thesis For today's session, we have a young scholar, Manikanta Radhakrishnan, to share his research on issues of equity and precarity in Canal Irrigation System, case study of Visvesvaraya Canal Network. Manikanta Radhakrishnan is an interdisciplinary hydrosociology researcher with cross-cutting experience in water governance, climate change adaptation, and mitigation and vulnerability assessments. He has experience in conducting and monitoring extensive field surveys and running analysis of both qualitative and quantitative data. He has presented his work at 2 international conferences. His research output paved the way for making policy recommendations and implementations in the field of academic research as well as governmental policies. Welcome again, Manikanta. May I now invite Mansee to take forward this session. Thank you, Mansee.
Thanks, Ekta, and thank you so much all the participants who are live with us here, and some of you are already also here and some will be waiting. We do these sessions every month, once in a month, and that's basically now a kind of a religion for us to get young scholars glued to the water sector. So as you see, Manikanta has a very interesting topic to talk about. On one hand, he's talking about a human constructed system, which is a canal irrigation system. But on the other side, he's also talking about the social construction of the society, which is the equity and precarity. And he's taking a very interesting example of Visvesvaraya Canal Network. So Manikanta, I will have my set of questions. I have read your presentation. And once you present, then and then only I'm going to ask you questions. Over to you, Manikanta. Your presentation was long overdue, and I'm super excited to hear from you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ekta, for the introduction, and thank you, Mansee, for the invitation of giving this opportunity to present. And so this is part of my master's thesis at the Krishnaraja University, and I'm extremely thankful for my supervisor, Sharad Lele, and Professor Vijay Shankar for grooming me in this research question. So the idea of looking at the equity and precarity in canal irrigation systems has come to me to analyze how does the social aspect play out in engineered hydrological systems, which is completely controlled by institutions, and governance are not so well defined across institutions and stakeholders. So the main idea is my presentation would be going through the evolution of dams for irrigation and what is the present context of canal irrigation systems in India, and what are the problems that canal irrigation system has. And then I would go about looking about problematizing these questions in a very disciplinary way of what exactly, how disciplines actually look at the, the issues of, the governance and canal irrigation systems. So the broad research context is just looking at how the dams have evolved over the years in India, and it's mainly due to the average rainfall being less in India, and how we kind of want to thinly spread the stored water in the reservoir as much as possible for a protective irrigation. So as earlier we see that this dam and dam building was mainly in terms of a productive construct, wherein we want to have an economic output as much as possible, and the social benefits are just the externalities of it. Because this came with the colonial mindset of having more and more dams. But also, as the famines increased, the colonialism, the Britishers also wanted to have a safeguard for the famines that we used to encounter. So then came the idea of having more dams even in the semi-arid regions. But over the years, even after the independence in India, we had the similar construction of having the productivity and growth by building more dams, and that's been the aspirational framework of independent India. But however, you see that without even the knowledge of it, there has been a rampant shift from the canal irrigation system that the dams provides to more of a groundwater system, which is more atmospheric, as Professor Tushar Shah mentions, more in terms of a democratization, as one would call it, but very atmospheric. But this came with more of socio-technical technology and institutional aspect from 60s and 70s. But however, the interesting aspect would be to look at the shifting rainfall patterns and how does the canal irrigation system plays out, because these are engineered hydrology. At the end of the day, these systems have been established and there for many years and still continue to exist and shape the ecological aspect, and also have a social construct which kind of goes back and forth in a loop. It shapes the ecology and also it gets influenced by it. So my research questions were, what is the nature and level of inequity in water sharing, given that the normative question of equity comes up inherently because of the command and control notion within the engineered hydrology. And how does the nature of level and distribution play out when there is a climate change aspect? So this broad two questions also lead to a much more in-depth question of what is the variability of canal water system within a head, mid and a tail end, in the normal years, and how does it play out in creating a different cropping systems and a different irrigation systems. So the case study that I chose was the Kaveri River Basin. And as we know that it's a water scarce region, which is highly conflict-ridden basin between the upper, riparian state of Karnataka and lower riparian state of Tamil Nadu. Hence, it's very interesting to see the dynamic socioeconomic factors impacting the water use and distributions across stage. There is an aspect of legality, there is an aspect of governance, and there is also an aspect of justice framework that this river basin, looks into. I would not go much in depth into the background of it, but the Kaveri River, the reservoir itself gets filled with the rivers that flows from the Western Ghats, mainly from the Kaveri and its tributaries. So the rainfall patterns range from around 1,700 mm to 3,800 mm. And the dam was built along with, the erstwhile Mysore Kingdom. One of the chief architect, to be Visvesvaraya himself, on whose name the multiple canals and canal systems are made. Actually, in fact, you get in-depth understanding of how much even though we call it an Indian hydrology, the individuals themselves have an influence over this region. Every village that you travel across the Mandya and the command area, you would see a bust of a Visvesvaraya there with a fresh garland in every day. So that's how he's revered as for bringing up this dam and bringing the water into the command area. So this 4 maps shows you an understanding of how the water systems has evolved over a period of time. In the upper riparian region, there is multiple reservoirs and multiple dams that the state kind of has able to create so that it can have a command over control over it. The image to the right side shows that the water distribution that has come up with the tribunal over a period of time. This is important in terms of understanding how the Karnataka state allocates water within its canal, releases to the command area such that the water is appropriated to the lower riparian region. So it has a huge catchment area. It has a huge command area of around 251,000 hectare agriculture land, and it's a very intricate and a complex network of canal systems. It's very difficult actually to put it up in a map, and it's a contour canal network, which basically means that there is water which flows along the gravity of it. And the command area is highly dominated by sugarcane and paddy. When the canals were actually constructed, Visvesvaraya had the notion of having one third of it to be a proportion to a sugarcane, so that the sugarcane economy kind of booms up in the Mysore kingdom, and the rest being the paddy and the dry crops. So the rainfall. So what I've looked into is precipitation data, and also looked into the 57 years rainfall data collected by the State Disaster Monitoring Center, and how does this rainfall pattern changes within the catchment area and the command area, and what it has a significance for the agriculture patterns. This is a broad literature and disciplinary aspect of how the engineered hydrology has been studied over the years. You can see that every disciplinary has a very limited understanding and doesn't cover the scope of multiple aspects of it. The hydrologist would look at a rainfall aspect and water and outlet, and what is the water in the root zone. That's up for the agriculture engineer to look at, and the operational creation is mainly criteria is to look for an engineered person. However, very little has been studied in understanding the interlinkages between the physical and social relations, and how the decisions shape the environmental and social outcomes of the stakeholders. So that for that I looked into the hydro social study, which is mainly my theoretical aspect. I looked into the more of hydrological data in terms of rainfall, dam inflows, and canal withdrawals, and also conducted field surveys to map out the social relation and socio-economic aspects. So this is one set of an hydrological data which clearly states that there's a strong interrelation between the catchment area rainfall and the inflow into the dam itself. One of an interesting aspect was to see and identify which are those years where the dam inflows was very precarious and very low, so that I would go back into the field and question the farmers about what exactly happened between these years. Another interesting data set that I came across is the State Disaster Monitoring Center, which says that there is a reduction in rainfall within the catchment areas over a period of time, and there is a slight increase in rainfall in the command area. So, which I went about asking people from a very qualitative perspective, question of how do they look at water scarcity in terms of the rainfall, the results which I'll be presenting. So this is a reservoir volume of the KRS. And as I was mentioning, this gave me an idea of which are the years that I should be looking at it in terms of where the precarity has occurred, and where there is a possible, inclination of change in the farmer behaviors, and what would be the particular reasons for it. Another thing is the canal withdrawals. As we can see that the canal withdrawals over a period of time from 1979 to 2009 has been changing. So the month of August and September is when there is a slight increase in the canal releases towards the farmers, which is actually a shift from actually June, July, the monsoon months. So a typical understanding is when the monsoon occurs in the June and July, the reservoir gets filled, and there is a subsequent releases of water for the paddy cultivation in the command area. But we see that over a period of time, there has been a more and more releases to the late month of August and September, which has a huge implication on the yield, for which I'll come into it. The below graph mentions that the canal withdrawals are very high in the months of September, October. But however, when the harvesting season of sugarcane comes up, that's exactly in the month of March, April, and May. That's when the maturity stage of the sugarcane comes up, and there is a very less average releases of canal where the farmer actually would be requiring. This is a broader understanding of the command area irrigation and cropping patterns. We can see that the canal, dependency on the canal has been coming up off late very less, and there is an increasing, inclination towards using the two wells. And also, the below graph mentions that there's a change in the cropping pattern over the years. There is a move towards more of a monocropping of sugarcane, but also there is a reduction in terms of a proportion of dry crops, which are essentially millets, which forms mainly the ragi in this region. For the study area, I looked into the four branches of this command within the command area and the KRS network. And within these four branches, as you can see in the map, I looked at the distributaries across the branch. So in a typical literature, we understand that there is a difference between the head, mid, and the tail region in the water allocation. But it's also interesting to look at there is a difference between the water allocation within each distributary and how whether there is a crop. And the interesting question therefore would be, has there been a difference in a water allocation and cropping system changes and irrigation system changes within a distributary, for which I looked into the 9 distributaries. And these 4 branches actually are very different in its own political and social angle and also hydrological angle. The first branch, as you can see in the map, is one which is closer to the dam. The other 2 are in the tail end region of the dam, and the one in the mid region. So for in terms of a field survey, I employed a participatory mapping wherein I would involve more of farmers and irrigation department engineers together, just to see also how collectively their knowledge matches within themselves. The participatory mapping would also involve how much of water has been allocated, what has been the cropping patterns within each distributary. It was an open-ended questionnaire so that I have a more of an ethnographic understanding of the region, and also conducted a more of a focus group in interviews within the water user associations within each distributary. So now I would like to present in terms of each branch, just to give a broader understanding that the agriculture patterns varies. The one closer, the first mile distributary is the one which is just like a few kilometers away from the main branch. So you would see more of a paddy cultivation and a very minimal use of bore wells here because the water is available throughout the year. And also the paddy is cultivated both in the monsoon as well as summer in this particular region, with the availability of water being more. However, you also see that there is a spillover effect of a sugarcane economy within the head reach also. So there is a lot of abundance, around 40% of farmers do grow sugarcane here. Similarly, you see that as we move away from the head of the branch, we see that there is more dependency on the bore wells. But however, this comes from the aspect that the canal water is not just alone sufficient to grow, because of a sugarcane factory which was established in 1938, the region has been like highly being monocropped with 80% of being sugarcane, which definitely requires a more of a borewell use because of the precarity in terms of the releases of canal. And as we move to the final distributary, within the distributary, the 24th mile distributary, we see that the initial phase of the distributary would be having a paddy and later on have a sugarcane. But however, with the less and less availability of water releases in the canal and availability, and also has these are the highlands where even the borewells have failed. Farmers have eventually resorted to growing the millets, which is very, requires very less water, and also has a eucalyptus cultivation, which is actually subsidized by the state, where the forest department has provided them in terms of a plantation, and they feel it's very remunerative, and they do not have to resort to a paddy or sugarcane where it requires a more of a water availability. And the other interesting branch that I looked into is the Kaveri branch canal. This is somewhere in the mid reach. The interesting aspect is it has a link canal wherein the water is directly pumped in from the head reach and given to the tail enders. This is a region, being in a mid region, is highly dependent on borewell for a coping mechanism. both even in monsoon and non-monsoon, where the due to the releases of being due to the release of canal water being very precarious, especially this use of dependency on the borewell came up during around 2004, which I also kind of have looked at in the reservoir volumes and the rainfall patterns. This was a huge drought year where the complete the KRS canals were dry. So in order to meet the sugarcane production, even in the dry years, the sugarcane factories kind of promoted more of a borewell usage, and also the state kind of subsidized highly for a borewell availability. So we see that the mid-reach point is where the sugarcane is grown, and also has a high dependency on the borewell. And another interesting aspect is that Tagruma branch. This is one of our tail end branches. One of an interesting exercises that I happened to conduct was to take the mid-reach farmers, water user association, and have a interaction with the tail end farmers. So 1.5 hour of intense discussion went on, and both of the farmers about to break into a fight because of how they want to get into a water being appropriated for them. So the tail end farmers say that it's their claim that they should be getting a water even in the summer season. As of now, the tail end farmers kind of get water appropriated only in the monsoon, which leaves them with only partly in terms of growing paddy and sugarcane with just the return flows that is generated in the mid-reach. So most of the return flows gets allocated in the ponds and lakes, and the first distributory within this branch is able to make use of this return flows and grow sugarcane and paddy. However, as we come to the more of a tail end of the end distributory within the tail end branch, we see that there 30% of the farmers go into the coconut, and even more surprising, even more interesting thing is to go into the eucalyptus plantation, which in itself is a more of a highly groundwater intensive plantation crop. As more and more farmers want to go into the borewell usage, but still they feel that going around with the plantation crops makes them more economically viable. The final branch canal that I looked into is the Cowley branch canal. It's interesting for one reason, that this branch canal had around 80% of dry crops 15-16 years back. With an introduction of a sugar factory in this area, the Karnataka the Kaveri Niravari Irrigation Department kind of promised them that they would be having a water allocated even during the summer season, which was not happening earlier. Only when the sugarcane factory was established, that the irrigation department kind of promised that you kind of grow sugarcane, and we would be providing you water even in the summer. So what exactly happened is, right now the situation is, the irrigation department has promised that they will be provided water, and since sugarcane is a 12-month crop, most of the dry the dry crop farmers have shifted to sugarcane. But eventually, due to the scarcity and precarity, the irrigation department is not able to provide the sufficient water to these farmers. Who have now shifted off from dry crops to sugarcane, which has a huge implication on the yield, which I'll be coming into the later stages. But however, we see that since this is a branch canal which historically was growing a more of a millets, has now shifted off to very less millet crops and only in the tail end regions of a distributaries. So this particular image shows you that in the normal years, where June, July was a vegetative stage for paddy, and August, October was a reproductive stage, and November was a harvesting stage. 1 acre used to yield around 30 quintals of paddy. But due to the late releases of canal overall, we see that the water has been allocated at the end of August and September, which kind of delays your reproductive stage, and your harvesting season goes around pushing towards more of a winter. So this has a huge implications, in terms of yield. This has been happening around 8 out of 10 years. So irrespective of whether you have a monsoon on time or not, there is a precarity in the monsoon and subsequently in the releases, and hence there is an impact on the yield. So this is for the paddy. However, the interesting aspect is to look at the impact on the sugarcane, which kind of explains through the scheduled irrigation in summers. Whereas August, September, October, November, and December, the water is being allocated throughout the month. In the summers, the irrigation department issues notice such as this that you can see in the picture, that they go around pasting in the villages that these are the particular dates, and these are the dates which we will be releasing water. So these are actually wherein there'll be only a 15 days of water allocation within a month. So a state kind of has promised that state irrigation department has kind of promised that they'll be providing water and to grow and promote sugarcane. But due to the fact that there will be only a 15 days of water allocation during the maturity stage of the sugarcane, there is around 30 to 35% decrease in the yield of sugarcane. So asking how does a farmer kind of cope up with this precarity and equity issues? The one in the head section kind of goes around using a groundwater and shifting towards more of a plantation crops. And the one in the tail end, continues to grow millets. And he also kind of hopes to grow sugarcane through the bore well. So these are the coping mechanisms that one has adapted to the precarity. And another interesting exercise that I went around doing is to ask, the farmers what exactly, do they consider the scarcity as a perception and rainfall and scarcity as a perception. Around 75% of the 114 interviews that I have done, farmers go about telling that it's actually the rainfall in the catchment area which is more important for them, and it's not the they do not bother about the rainfall in the command area as much. So so there's a strong relation between for an engineering structure of dam. There's also a strong social relation of people perceiving the rainfall within the catchment and command area. So overall, the conclusion would be that the canal releases are becoming very uncertain in both monsoon and summer. The farmer federations and the water users association have very less stronghold over it, and its irrigation department is having a very disconnected to the ground. In the data that I was able to obtain regarding the farming systems about the irrigation patterns and also the cropping pattern, we see a large disconnected between the field data and what the secondary data. The command and control dynamics of canal define the agriculture system in terms of yield and crop choice. And the coping mechanism differs across the in the canal command area. People who are able to afford the borewell are the one who are able to have mitigate this loss in the yield. So that also explains about how the adaptation and mitigation strategies are very skewed. So the main aspect would be not just to look at the command and control aspect of in this engineered hydrology which has been there since years, but also look at the climate change aspect which has been dynamic and coming up over the years. I also happened to get an opportunity to have a similar exercise about late releases and impact on the yield in the Narmada Canal regions in Gujarat, where I was able to see a very, whereas guided by the people from Development Support Center, and able to see a similar pattern of impact on the yield and delay and monsoon variability in the tail end region of the in the irrigation command area. So overall, I would like to say that it's the engineered hydrology is a factor of both political economy, wherein the state wants to promote a sugarcane economy, but unable to deliver in terms of engineered hydrology, and so on. So as an implication in terms of people who have caught up with this, in the loop of growing a monocrop and also not being able to have a proper coping mechanism, and those who are able to have a coping mechanism are the only ones who are able to afford the bore wells, and subsequently are the ones which we see in a normal command area, ones with are politically and caste one who are having a dominance in terms of a caste and class. So these are my broad conclusions, and understand, given the time limit, have taken up only 2 or 3 questions that I have dealt in my thesis and presented my conclusions and findings. Yeah, open for the questions.
Thank you, Manikanta. Am I audible to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. And to be honest, you just nailed the problem which is there. We are facing today, whether we talk about monocropping culture and whether we talk about our dependence on groundwater. And how did we shift to that dependence on groundwater? And what political economy is being played when farmers are, in a way, pushed to do certain kind of cropping? And that has emerged from this precarity of water distribution, which kind of at some point in time in last 100 years has become like a state subject, which was initially not before the irrigation system we had laid out. It was more of a community subject where farmers used to take a call on the kind of irrigation system, on the kind of water distribution between them, on the kind of cropping pattern. So somewhere governance, and as you rightly mentioned, institutions' role is key. So before I really ask you a question for the sake and of the session as well as our protocol, let me just summarize what you presented here. And to be honest, I was just listening to you very carefully to understand from the very idea of development which you mentioned that we continue to do the same mistakes when we started with the damming, of water. And the whole dam culture changed our agricultural pattern itself. And slowly it has become a new culture of agriculture where we are actually farming for profit, not farming for people. That's the major philosophical shift which we can see post dams. And that you very clearly detailed out through your, head reach to middle reach to tail end, how farmers are coping, and I will say not even coping, but strategizing to maximize their profits. This way or that way, whether they get water from the canal or whether they get water from the ground. I mean, because India is now the largest groundwater exploiter in the world, and somewhere we are pushed to that system. So when you are into this kind of research, do you ask yourself a question, if these canals and dams were to make more efficient irrigation system, how come we moved to groundwater? Because this was all about the politics of surface water. And we ended up doing politics of groundwater. What is your feeling? I mean, it's outside your syllabus, but I think you got a feeling of it when you were on the field.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So, no doubt, the dams were constructed with all good intention of bringing more economy, and for a Mysore kingdom to establish a more efficient economy and develop and everything. And that's one of the reasons why Visvesvaraya is revered as a god in all these villages, and it's fascinating to see his burst in every village with a fresh garland every day. But however, I think there has been a very little understanding in terms of even currently when the irrigation department kind of wants to promise that they will be providing water, which without any scientific understanding of what actually is the requirement for farmers, and what is an idea that one should be establishing, is something fascinating. And also, I mean, these structures have been there since hundreds of years and has played out a role in terms of socioeconomic inequity. Whereas this upcoming thing of, this since the 70s, we see more of a groundwater. This groundwater itself has evolved in terms of a market within the villages, where those who have and have not are able to trade water.
At large versus small farmers.
Yeah, large versus small farmers. Of course, one would argue that this has given a very little marginal cost for the farmers to obtain water through groundwater. The buyers are also benefiting. But the question becomes in terms of an accessibility to water, in terms of the justice. And so, should a small farmer, not be able to have a kind of a strategizing, a mechanism for his yield, whereas a big farmer who's able to get both canal as well as groundwater is better off. So what do we, the normative questions actually kind of becomes very important. That's one thing. Of course, the state becomes a central figure in framing all these questions.
Yeah, interestingly, we see that when you're talking about the whole Kaveri basin, I will consider that basin to be distributed as a transboundary basin, whether it is river or whether it is a canal system, because we have different districts going through, we see a lot of water conflicts also arising, as you rightly mentioned, from the catchment to command area. The decisions are actually infected, or I will say influenced, actually impacted by the way precarity is visible in the presence of water, in the distribution of water. And on one hand, we see that when promises are being made, it's really not based on the scientific evidence of availability of water, but it is based on how deep can we go and extract groundwater and provide to the farmers. So, it's like it's a state-driven groundwater exploitation for growing more. And then when we are actually pushing, I will say, to the farmers to grow more for the benefits, we are also pushing them to grow a crop which is water intensive, as we see. So if upstream people are growing sugarcane more, how come the downstream people are going to get more water? It is as simple a simple math as any school-going children can even imagine. So in this situation, I feel quite surprised, and for that matter, paddy also, when we have moved to dry farming like millet farming to water-intense farming, and especially sugarcane, which is an annual product, and then paddy being grown twice a year. On one hand, we are short of water. On the other hand, we are growing more water-intensive cropping. So it's a double loss to the society in that term. So do you not see that there is a kind of a disconnect when we are talking about addressing sustainability, addressing climate change, and at the same time we are talking about water-intensive cropping and talking about maximizing profit? Where do you see state machineries are really thinking through and trying to converge and move towards sustainability? I don't see any hope towards sustainability, to be honest, because as long as farming is for profit, we are going to continue this strategy. Where do you see from the ground? What are people talking about it? Are people happy to draw more groundwater because their current business goes well? Are they concerned about future, and are they getting hit by the climate change?
Yeah, so there are two questions, right? Like, how do we frame the question of sustainability itself, and what is the state thinking about this aspect of sustainability vis-a-vis what does the institutions of the academia and educational institute, for example, even there is a UAS agriculture university which actually plays a role in Mandya, in the command area for the farmers, thinking of what crops should they grow. So I think the aspect of sustainability framing comes from idea that we'll be having first a more kind of a productivity, which will be having creating more kind of an income, and that income kind of creates more of a sustainability in terms of a farmer's choice to to decide what
you used a very beautiful word. You used a beautiful words. They are protective and productive farming.
Protective and productive farming. Yes. So the idea of sustainability, no doubt, is kind of like emerging in across different institutions and stakeholders in the state. But the aspect of how each stakeholder defines it kind of varies. Institutions such as agriculture universities kind of want to come up with more crops varieties which are more resistant towards drought. But however, they want to stick to the same old variety, crop, which is sugarcane. But they want to make it more, resistance to the the crops. But however, a farmer is more concerned in terms of it's not binary. He's happy to grow millets. I've asked plenty of farmers during my field survey what is the economy of millets, and because it's a finger millet ragi intensive region, there is particularly no market creation for these crops that the state has showed any interest. So farmers is definitely not inclined towards it. Growing more millets. But also interestingly, that's a crop that he is consuming for his household. So this region is the one that's not actually, the food security is not through the paddy, but it's more through the.
But they grow paddy. Paddy is their main crop because that's for profit, not for their staple food.
Yeah, so we see that the cropping system is being defined through what is not just binary in terms of water availability, but also in terms of the market creation, that there are multiple stakeholders who are involved in it.
So do you think that actually we are totally into protective, productive farming when we are seeing that there are more paddy in the upstream and more nilgiri and millet on the downstream, where they are also quite tempted, I'm sure, to grow more sugarcane if given more water, But it's just the water is not reaching that much that they can grow that much sugarcane. But why do you think it's a very emotional or moral question for me, which I'm always asking, and that's pertaining to two major crops in the country. And probably one is out of your work, but you can still talk about it. Why in a country we are so obsessed with growing sugarcane and potato when we know both of them are harmful to our health? Just because of getting more profit? What are farmers talking about it? So they can earn more money to buy some healthy food, or is it better to grow healthy food? I mean, I don't understand this from the government perspective as well. Why would you promote sugarcane in the country? In your case, I mean, I have the same question for, all kinds of basmati being grown and which is eating up all the varieties of paddy. When everybody wants to grow basmati, which takes much more water than the local rice, Same way a potato for that matter. So why as a society we want to do, I mean, you talked about it in terms of dam, but I have this question same for cropping. Why do we want to do wrong cropping? Nilgiris for that matter. It takes more water and you are growing it in a place where it is already water starving, which is a downstream. What do you think? I mean, what are we thinking? I mean, we are in a country with a lot of science, huh?
Yeah. No, I think it's a fascinating thought, which actually I've also visited. I mean, revisited it many times in my mind. That given a choice that a farmer is able to have any, income through growing any crop, would his choice of consumption of a produce, his choice of consumption be any different than what he grows? Let's
yes, absolutely. That's a very good question.
Yeah, hypothetically, when he grows a sugarcane, does his food security and food nutrition come from a better choice, given that now he has more income? That's actually a thought that perhaps one should look into it in the future research of the choice of the food consumption of these farmers, especially who are involved in potato, the low yielding varieties of wheat, and also in terms of sugarcane. I mean, from the research, we know that most of the low variety of paddy, the wheat that the Punjab farmers grow, they themselves do not consume it.
Yes,
but the state,
same with sugarcane. They don't consume all the sugar. Just a second, Manikanta, may I request you to close the presentation so that I can put both of us on the screen? Yeah, thank you. Please continue.
So I think it's kind of a state takes in charge of that. It's a procurement strategy of a state that meets its political economic ideology. So unless and until we kind of have a paradigm shift between of a political machinery to have a different kind of a framework, then perhaps we all of us are caught in this idea of
vicious cycle.
Consumer.
Vicious cycle, But how do you think research like this can really bring a change in the way farmers look at it? I know a lot of game theories are played with farmers. I mean, I come across many of those as with the commons work, I mean, especially looking at the work with FES, Dan Foundation and all, they're trying to bring a change in the way farmers look at farming, not doing this monoculturing and not doing water intensive and playing strategic farming. How do you think that these kind of important research like you are doing can really bring a change, especially when you take up these focus group discussions and all? We can take it further too. So my question is more on the method. So did you think of doing game theory and, just playing that devil's advocate and really making farmers and probably go back in postdoctoral and go and see, did they really change something in there? Do you see methods can really play a role in bringing a change in the society? I'm a strong believer of that, to be honest. What is your take?
I personally believe that modeling or any kind of a game theory, it's very difficult to model or predict a human choice and a behavior, and especially a farmer's choice and a behavior. It's very different. So one of the way is to look at the methods of hydrosociological aspects. When we look at only in terms of an engineered aspect or a modeling of water availability, we kind of miss out what does actually the farmer think about in terms of his choices. So I think the framework such as hydrosociology kind of gives you an opportunity to perhaps look at given an X factor, what would be your a choice of a coping strategy, or in in irrigation patterns, X and Y. So then, as in when we kind of want to create more and more variables and conditions, perhaps we are better able to understand the farmer's choice and behavior. So, which is kind of a challenge. So I think it's more of a in terms of coming up with better framework and more academically oriented in terms of how better we approach with every kind of literature and contextualize it to the ground is I think kind of can answer what we
Interestingly, you actually put the section of coping mechanism, which I will say learning for the farmer, but not really learning for your research, but because you have much more learning from the work you do. But what makes me quite surprised that for their learning or coping mechanism to deal with all these disparity or precarity in water distribution. They see groundwater as a strategy. They see monocropping as a strategy. They see, growing certain crops which they may grow lesser, but they can gain more profit. That's the whole idea of growing nilgidis for that matter. But do you think that they can be conveyed at some point in time, if not through your research, but otherwise also, that it's actually not a coping strategy, but it is actually pushing us towards bigger problems in future? Do they foresee this problem, or do you think that science has some way to convey this to them? Because of course they will do farming based on their profit, especially in a country where we are constantly hammering the farmers, saying that their life has been made easy with all the subsidies without realizing that eventually that subsidy is benefited by us by paying so less to large extent for the crops, to large extent for the food prices.
Yeah, so I mean, I had a opportunity soon after my thesis. I had an opportunity to visit Samaj Prakti Sahayog in Madhya Pradesh,
Okay.
and their institutions and what they have created on ground. It's kind of a brilliant when these communities in Madhya Pradesh are coming together as commons and have kind of making a rules within themselves that they'll not be growing a certain kind of a crop. So that altruism within a group and what the rules they kind of want to create within themselves is very important. So we very well know of the Ostrom principles,
Yes.
which came up in the 90s, but from my experience with looking at some of the case studies in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, that these kind of norms and institutions existed a long time back, and perhaps they have been eroded. But institutions like Samaj Prakti Sahayog kind of revived this, and that's where actually lies the thing. So, having the knowledge and science is one aspect, but how well are we able to tune this groups and create an institutions and a local governance which is more pluralistic in the sense, kind of defines, I think, what lay a future, what kind of a future that we want to see.
Interesting, because you do mention something very interesting here, where you say that yes, these local institutions or local norms are now slowly playing, but we also realize that these are little bright spots in the large dark spot, and that's the heterogeneous dark spot, which we can say, where people are doing farming more for production. But that brings me to the last question to you for today. We can talk outside the session much longer for this wonderful discussion here. Where do you see millet can revive the whole farming system, which we are right now following? Because you also are aware that we are celebrating the millet year, but at the same time, we are also profit maximizers as farming community. We are the largest groundwater extractors. Given this situation, I know these transitions are slow, but do you see there can be more such samaj? There can be more of this kind of production, which can bring a change again, because we have increased our paddy production, sugarcane production by many folds in last many decades. What is your take here? How optimistic are you in this? And that's my last question for you.
I think reviving millets or any kind of another nutritious crop for the sake of a food security kind of has to be more in terms of a policy oriented, which understands the water, energy, and food nexus in a better manner. Of course, I mean, the state of Karnataka, for example, talked about procuring millets for its midday meal scheme, which is brilliant for its policy. But are we really addressing away from the procurement? We need to focus on in terms of the production. Once we have a policy of many of such sort, perhaps it would trace back in on ground where farmers are more inclined towards cultivating millets because there is a procurement and then there is market for it. So I think such kind of a policies where we don't need just one, wherein perhaps the Food Corporation of India can procure more of millets and distribute it across the nation, not just wheat and paddy for its thing, and then a promise of better a market system and a support system for farmers in growing this will eventually have a better implications on not just food security but also it's on water and groundwater and on the policies for it.
Thank you so much, Manikanta, and it's really a pleasure talking to you. I think we will have more discussions outside the session, but for the time being, I really congratulate you and your supervisors and institutions for carrying out such a difficult work actually to do. But at the same time, I also see the passion with which you have worked hard in the project. And I'm sure your work can bring a change into the way we look at farming, the way we look at water extraction, the way we look at disparity in water distribution. We didn't talk about the social aspects of it, but I'm sure there are layers of religion, caste, class, everything into it, which is embedded into this discussion, but our focus was more on the water distribution. So thanks again, and thank you so much, and thanks Ekta for starting up the session. And before we end the session, let me just announce for the next week. As you know, at W4W Foundation, we have been doing Monday Munching for Women for Water, where we invite women water warriors. Then we have Wednesdays for Water, which is our flagship program. So next Wednesdays for Water, we are actually having a keynote speech from Ms. Zeenat Niazi, who is from Development Alternatives Group. And it's a keynote speech to celebrate the World Earth Day. And the next Friday Waters is on water arts. As you know, on Friday Waters, we do water talkies, book reading, thesis club like Manikanta is today. And then we have water arts. So with this announcement, please join us and keep following us in our social media handles and our website, www.w4w.in. And please take care of yourself. And we look to see all of you again. And bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mansee. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.